I'd like to welcome our instructors, and at this point, I will turn things over to Tammy King, and we can get started.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Karen. All right. Oops. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, we are here for this webinar, let's talk about language-focused approaches to engaging with families of multilingual children. I'm one of the co-presenters today, but really I'm just the backup singer. Our main presenter is Dr. Lorena Mancilla, and she is the WIDA Early Years Director. I'm excited to have her here with us today. She actually has very deep roots here in Illinois. In fact, she used to be a teacher here in Illinois before she joined WIDA. And her current role at WIDA, she is the Early Years Director. So she is running the department, the growth department at WIDA that covers early childhood education. She also has her doctorate, which is fantastic now. And so her research focuses on the intersection between family engagement and language education. So you'll see that theme certainly very strong in today's session. That's me on the right-hand side of the screen, and I am the Professional Development Program Manager at Early Childhood Professional Learning, which is one of the projects or departments at the Center, Resources for Teaching and Learning. Many of you may have known me from my 12 plus years at the Illinois Resource Center. Now I'm just down the hall. Well, currently I'm in my basement. But at the other department that works with early childhood. Speaking of my basement, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old upstairs that hopefully you won't hear, but you might, as I am sitting right underneath the main hallway here in our house. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. If you hear any interesting noises upstairs, it would be my coworkers. All right, so in order for us to get a little bit of an idea of who we've got joining us today, we would like to ask that you very quickly just take a moment to click on what your particular role is right now in your program. So you're going to do that. You're seeing here, you've got those little circles that are covering up the PowerPoint screen. That's what you want to click on. And if you click other, if you would type that particular, pardon me, if you would type your role over in the big chat box on the left side of your screen, that would be fantastic. Because I know we don't have every single role available there for you to choose. But it looks like we've got a good number of PFA teachers, Preschool for All teachers on this afternoon, a few expansion teachers, a couple of family educators, excellent. No instructional leaders today. We've got a couple of administrators and some folks that fall into that other category. Oh, goodness, quite a few people falling into the other category. Now that it's loading. Interesting. Okay, very good. Some parapros, coaches. Cool. Excellent. Thank you. That's very helpful for us as we move forward today. And just a little bit of housekeeping before I hand things over to Lorena. I wanted to let you know that we're going to be doing several chats this afternoon as part of this webinar. In fact, we're going to have one in just a moment. And just so that you are aware, we will be capturing all of the text from those chat boxes, and you will get a copy of that after today's webinar has concluded, along with a link to a recording of this webinar. So if there's anything that you want to go back and revisit, you'll be able to do that by rewatching that recording or taking a look at those chats. I just wanted to let you know that from the outset. You don't have to worry about trying to take a bunch of screenshots or anything like that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lorena.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with folks from my home state. So I'm coming to you live from my home office here in Hoffman Estates. So I'm based in the Chicago area. So it's a pleasure to be here. And we are actually, before I dive into the content, we're going to have a chat moment. I see some of you are still introducing yourselves and telling us what your role is. But with 84 people joining us today, which is exciting, tell us, please, why is this topic important to you? The title of today's webinar is Let's Talk About Language-Focused Approaches to Engaging with Families of Multilingual Children. And on the chat box, please go ahead, take a moment and tell us, why is this topic important to you? So as folks are typing, Tammy, you're the pro at facilitating chat box activity. So let me know, Tammy, if there's something that stands out to you. Oh, I'm loving this.
We've got lots of good information coming in here, definitely. We've got a number of folks on the line today that are bilingual. Excellent. We're glad to have you here so you can bring that native language component to your students and to your families that you're working with. And it's interesting to see we have a couple of physical therapy assistants on with us today. So that'll be cool to have that perspective shared with us.
I see several folks. It's the population that you're serving. I see a lot of folks who are writing about I serve dual language learners. I was an English language learner. You're working with linguistically diverse families. Yes. Excellent. All right. Tammy, what do you think? We should go on? Excellent. Yep. Okay. So today's webinar and the time that we're together, our goals for this presentation are simple. We have three. We want to raise awareness about the need for language-focused family engagement and how it supports multilingual children and their families. Number two, we want to initiate critical reflection on opportunities to integrate language education and family engagement, two distinct fields and two very important fields that need to be brought together when we're working with linguistically diverse children and families. And three, we want to help generate ideas for action. How can you apply what you've learned today? You'll see that we're providing you handouts with links to resources that are available on the website. So how can you apply what you learned today in your local settings? And I'm going to digress just a moment and give a slight shout out to someone I see in the chat box, Yasmin Mancia. Never met you, Yasmin, but it is so rare for me to find folks with the last name Mancia that somewhere down the line we're probably related. So I'm glad you're here. And speaking then of the handouts, Tammy, why don't you go ahead and tell them a bit about what we've provided?
Definitely. So you should have received, and in fact, you did receive a link to these handouts on Tuesday. You would have received an email, your confirmation, kind of your friendly reminder email for today's webinar. And in that webinar, in all caps, you'll find the word handouts. And when you click on that, it'll take you to these two documents. So what you see here, on the left-hand side, sorry, I was looking for my little arrow that I would be able to point to this here. There we go. Very good. There's our pointer. All right, so here you'll see this, the top of this particular page says links for, and then the name of today's webinar. So when we reference the links handout, this is the one that we're talking about. It's 2 pages, and it has thumbnails of the various documents on it. And no need to print this. In fact, you probably don't even want to worry about printing it because the power of this handout is in the links that are embedded in it. The title of each one of these handouts is a hyperlink that will take you right out to the web where you can download this particular document for free. Now, some of these are available in between 2 to 4 languages, so you're going to need to click on each of those languages if you want to have a copy of each version of that particular document. Then the other handout we have for you, we refer to as the membership benefits flyer or the benefits flyer. And this has, just to call your quick attention to it here, information about the modules on it. And we'll be talking about those right towards the very end, I believe, today, or at some point today. We'll be talking, I'm sorry, I'm confusing this with a different webinar. But the modules are something that you can go back and take a look at a later date. It's free professional development for you that you can access. And so the information about how to do that will be on that benefits flyer. You'll also see as we go through on some of the slides, there'll be references to these 2 different handouts to remind you that that's where you'll find those links. All right, Lorena, back to you.
All right. So with an overview here, real quick, what we're going to do with this presentation is we're going to start off by unpacking some key terms and concepts. We're going to then answer the question, what is language-focused family engagement? This is a unique lens to family engagement that drives the work that we at WIDA do when it comes to families and that integration of language education and family engagement. Then we're going to explore a bit of this next question. How can we apply this information to our practice? Tammy and I were pretty thoughtful in thinking folks, especially right now, folks are going to want to know, what can I do? What can I use? What can I share with families? So that's what helped us select the resources we're sharing with you. And then lastly, so where do we go from here? We're together for 1 hour. We're limited to interaction with the chat box. So we wanted to make sure that we offer you some suggestions of what to do after this webinar with the information that we're going to be sharing with you. So what we also want to do before we dive into the content is tell you a bit more about the partnership that we have, that WIDA Early Years has with the state of Illinois. And as you see here, we're partnering and working very closely with Tammy and others at the Early Childhood Professional Learning Center, at the Illinois State Board of Education. So we're going to take just a couple minutes and sort of introduce everybody to the partnership that we have. And that partnership is actually what brought us together today for this webinar. So some of you may be familiar with WIDA, but you may not be familiar with WIDA Early Years. So you may be wondering, what is WIDA Early Years? WIDA is an organization that's based at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are recognized as a leader in resources to support multilingual children and youth. We're part of the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. And WIDA Early Years, our focus is to promote equitable early care and education opportunities for young multilingual children. We partner with state agencies to deliver tools, resources, professional learning to early care and education communities. So Illinois is one of 7 WIDA Early Years member states. You can see the map there on the screen. And Illinois is also one of the 40 states, federal agencies, and U.S. territories that are members of the WIDA K-12 consortium. So Illinois, for several years, has had a long-standing relationship with WIDA, and we're really excited to finally have a partnership in place between the state and WIDA Early Years. Sammy?
Speaking of which, so I'll tell you a little bit about why now? Why do we have this partnership right now here in Illinois? In fact, this partnership just started not even a year ago. So it was August of 2019 that the partnership began. So if you haven't heard about this yet, it's all right. It hasn't been around too terribly long here in Illinois, at least the early childhood component of it. So why now? Well, now is the time, I feel, we all do, to help empower you as early childhood educators here in Illinois in order to be able to provide an equitable and high quality education for our youngest English learners. We know that our population of students continues to grow, as many of you mentioned when we asked you what brought you here today. The population of English learners across the state is growing. At least 10% of all Illinois students are English learners. And so if 10% of all students in Illinois are English learners, if we take a look at that population of 10% of all 10% of students are English learners, 63% of them are between pre-K to 3rd grade. So our English learner population in this state is young, primarily pre-K to 3rd grade. And just to let you know too, to give you some context, this is not unique to just the city of Chicago or the city of Chicago and the collar counties. Out of 102 counties here in our state, 92 now serve English learners. And in fact, that data is just a little bit old because we don't have the most recent data right now. So as of about 2 years ago, 92 of 102 counties serve English language learners here in the state of Illinois. So our population is definitely growing and will continue to do so. So that brings us to the middle part of this slide, the need for statewide professional learning opportunities. We know a number of years ago there was a movement here in Illinois to have preschool teachers go back to school and get their ESL and or bilingual coursework taken care of if they're working with English learners. And so many people have done that. In fact, some of you on today's webinar may have done that. But what we found and what kind of happened inadvertently in the way this rolled out was that you may have taken those courses with professors who were not familiar with early childhood education. They were very knowledgeable in English language learners and in ESL and bilingual methodology, but not necessarily preschool and developmentally appropriate practice. So what happened is you may have gained, and what we've been hearing from the field is, We learned a lot of great information, but we don't know how to apply it into an early childhood setting. So what we need is we need statewide opportunities for professional learning. So as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the things that's available to you even right now, if this is of interest to you beyond today's webinar, are these 5 online modules that you'll be able to access for free. And they're self-paced, and all of the information for those is on that benefits flyer, along with some other aspects of our relationship with WIDA that you can take a look at there. So when we embarked on this, it was done through our department, Early Childhood Professional Learning at the Center in Arlington Heights. So what we do is we operationalize this partnership, and I'm the primary person here in the state of Illinois to do that. But of course, the funding is coming from the Illinois State Board of Education. And so why through ECPL? Well, with my background in ESL and bilingual education, in fact, I've been in this field since 1999, and I've been working in early childhood now since 2017, it just made sense for this to work through our department. So it's something that we're very excited to be spearheading here in Illinois. And with that, I will hand it back.
Yeah. So we're going to pause just a quick second here and see if any questions are bubbling up for anyone about the partnership that Illinois has with WIDA Early Years. Any questions on what Tammy and I just shared for you? And again, I'm just going to pause just a few seconds, see if anything's coming up. All right. Okay, let's dive in then. Excellent. So let's get started then by unpacking a couple of the key terms and concepts that we will be discussing in today's webinar. This webinar uses terms and concepts that can be defined in a variety of ways. So to ensure that we all have a common understanding of how these terms are used in today's presentation, I will briefly define and discuss the terms that you see listed on the slide: multilingual children, families, and family engagement. The term multilingual children is used to refer to culturally and linguistically diverse children ages birth to 5 who are simultaneously or sequentially learning 2 or more languages. Multilingual children are exposed to multiple languages in their homes, their communities, and/or their early care and education settings. They develop and they use language in dynamic ways. In the field, these children are commonly referred to as dual language learners or DLLs. Our team began using multilingual children because we wanted a term that better reflected WIDA's can-do philosophy. Our can-do philosophy emphasizes and focuses on the strengths, the assets, like what can these children do? So we wanted to highlight that many of these children are bilingual, multilingual, so we wanted to bring that forward instead of emphasizing that they are language learners. So we use the term multilingual children in WIDA Early Years. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know several of you may be familiar to DLL or ELL, etc. The next term is families. Families is used in this presentation to refer to parents, siblings, extended family members, close family friends, guardians, and other adults who contribute in significant ways to children's development and education. As I speak about families in today's presentation, please keep in mind that I am specifically speaking about families that are racially, culturally, linguistically diverse, as these are the families that we in WIDA Early Years that we serve in our work with multilingual children. So here I know with different cultural groups, sometimes extended family members play significant roles, nuclear family members. So me being I'm Latina of Mexican descent, so the abuelitas, las tías, los tíos, las madrinas, padrinos, they all play significant roles. So we have a very broad view of the term families. Next is family engagement, and this is a term that, believe it or not, it's really important as educators that we have a common understanding on what we mean when we say family engagement. Family engagement refers to homeschool relationships built on trust and respect. It's intended to promote two-way communication. That's going to be essential to today's conversation, that two-way communication. Family engagement is also relationships that are ongoing, ideally from early childhood all the way through a child's K-12 experience. They are focused, these relationships are focused on student learning and achievement. Now, here, as advocates, as educators, as care providers for multilingual children, we need to expand when we see student learning, student achievement, early learning, child's development. We need to make sure that we are explicitly making space for language, for bilingualism, for multilingualism. So it's making that space and recognizing that the child isn't just learning and developing cognitively with motors. I mean, it's also language, and that's a huge piece, especially as these children transition to K-12 systems. So, family engagement, especially in our work with multilingual children and families, it's also about social justice and equity. Decades of research in the field of family engagement show that families that are racially, culturally, linguistically diverse often face a variety of barriers and challenges when it comes to engaging with the educators that are serving their children. So it is an issue of social justice, equity. It does require us at times to be advocates, advocates for the families, advocates with the families, in order to ensure that their children are having access to quality early learning experiences. So, because of all of this at WIDA, as educators and advocates for children, we have to apply an equity lens to our work with families. So, at WIDA, we strive to advocate for multilingual children and youth by supporting families' rights to engage meaningfully with educators about their children's language development, and more importantly, its relationship to early care and education, and ultimately K-12 academic achievement. So families do have the right to have meaningful two-way communication with educators. And one of the things that you'll see we are stressing today is, what are we talking about with families when it comes to their child's language? Um, so with that, I'm going to pause here. We're going to bring the chat box back. So please enter your response to the question that you see on the screen. We want you to think. Now, you notice that I underlined one. So, what is one thing you do to engage with families of multilingual children that works well for the families you serve? So, what's one thing you do right now, one tool in your toolbox that when you do this activity or you do this event or you do this certain thing with the families that you serve, families respond positively, it works. So, let's go ahead and just share that one thing that works for you. And remember, we're going to be capturing all of this and sharing it with all the participants with us today. So, you'll get to see what others are sharing. And Tammy, as usual, I'll ask you to help me facilitate, moderate the chat.
Absolutely. And I'm already seeing a theme around using various apps like Class Dojo, and there's one other one I saw pop by. I think it was the Remind app. And then events. I see events and newsletters seem to also be, or other methods of paper communication going home. Definitely some events, end of semester party, potlucks, parent involvement in the classroom, having interpreters available during meetings. So I'd say those are some of the themes that we've got, emails as well. Oh, class.
Rich environments in multiple languages. Excellent.
Excellent, cool.
Okay. So, All right, are you all ready? We're going to tackle what is language focused family engagement. I remember now we just defined family engagement as being homeschool relationships built on trust and respect. They have meaningful two-way communication. They're ongoing from early childhood through K-12. And these relationships, these homeschool relationships, focus on students' learning and overall achievement. And remember, I said when we serve multilingual children and youth, that focus on learning and achievement has to include the space for their language learning, language development. So now let's get into why at WIDA we call it language focused family engagement. So, language focused family engagement is an approach to working with families. It's a lens. It's a lens that focuses on the families and educators of multilingual children and youth. It emphasizes the important role that language plays in the home environments and the learning contexts of multilingual children and youth. If you think about it this way, language isn't just learned within the four walls of an early childhood classroom or space. Language is learned in the community. Language is learned at home. Language is learned when children are observing how the adults around them are interacting. When a child is bilingual, multilingual, they're experimenting with all their language. They're code switching. So, language focused family engagement really centers using that equity lens in capturing and truly understanding a child's use of language, their language development, those opportunities for exposure that are happening across home, community, school. So it does require that two-way communication because at the end of the day, families are experts in how their child is using language. So, language focused family engagement brings to the forefront the role that language plays across the different environments that young children are weaving in and out of. And before I dive in here, I want to quickly show you the yellow bubble that you see on the screen, the go to the links handout, the resource you see on this slide. You do have the URL, you have the link to this publication, which you can get off of the WIDA website. So here on this slide, the information I just shared, it's published within this resource. So, language focused family engagement, you may have briefly heard me say this a little earlier. It is the intersection, it sits at the intersection of the field of family engagement and the field of language education. So, language education, I want you to think of that's your bilingual, ESL, multilingualism, second language acquisition, looking at home language practices, families, there's a research field, family language policies. So families have their own rules sometimes where at home we only speak the home language. Or the children know that with one parent they speak one language, with the other parent they speak the other language, or with a grandparent. So there are family language policies. So when I use the term language education, I want you to think about it broadly within an educational context, but also the language education that is happening in the home. So, at the heart of language focused family engagement is parent voice. This is a concept that plays an important role in the research that I've done and I've had the opportunity to do with families, with parents of multilingual children. Parent voice is the right and opportunity for multilingual parents and caregivers to express their thinking, beliefs, understandings about language learning and language use. This includes how their children and family use language at home, how language is used within their community and or society, and language learning experiences in and out of early care and education programs or K-12 environments. Ideally, these understandings that families have and these beliefs that they have about language, in an ideal world, they have weight within children's learning environments. By that, I mean that they're considered a valuable source of data or information when it comes to a child's language learning and development. Parent voice may consist of parents' desires, dreams, goals, hopes for their children's bilingualism or multilingualism. It may also be their concern over the language used. For instance, language used in the classroom, language that children are exposed to in the community. Or I know from work with parents, sometimes parents are concerned when they hear their young children code switch. It may also be the fears that families have about language. In the work that I've done with parents recently, it is a common fear that has been expressed is the fear of losing the home language. But parent voice may also come in the form of frustration, of anger. They may feel like they're experiencing exclusion, discrimination, or disrespect because of the languages that they speak. So, parent voice is something that is really important. And here, what I'd like to really emphasize, and I'm going to throw a question out at you to think about is in all the communication that you do with the families that you serve, how often are you creating spaces for parent voice? Remember, it means the beliefs, the desires, the goals. Language beliefs run deep because language is a part of our identity. So, how are you creating spaces for beliefs, desires, goals, hopes, dreams to be shared? Along with those fears, the concerns, the frustrations, along with questions that they have about their child's language learning and development. So, families need opportunities, especially families of multilingual children, they need opportunities to talk about language. So, here, if you're already sitting there thinking, like, what do we ask them? A common question that we ask is another language spoken in your home? What language do you use to speak to the child? So those are common questions. So knowing that there's more to parent voice than just what language is spoken in your home. What other opportunities are we providing families to actually have meaningful conversations with their child's educator about language? So, here, what you're looking at are some examples of quotes from parents that participated in a recent research project that our team conducted in Maryland with parents of young children ages birth 0 to 5. And the young children are enrolled in a variety of different early care and education programs. So, the first quote in the yellow speech bubble, it's very important to me, not even just my home language, but just a second language. That's my number one thing. This quote came from a mother in response to a question she was asked about what factors did she consider when selecting an ECE program for her child. And for her, it was really important that her child get exposure to different languages. So, like here, I love how she says, that's my number one thing. And her child was 3 years old. So, this mom from a very young age, that was number one on her mind was how do I expose my child to as many languages as possible? Her ultimate goal was for her children to be multilingual. In the blue, you see a quote that says, I want my son to speak our language and English together because our language is also important to him because of who he is. Over and over in the research as we explore parents' beliefs and parents' values about language, it's tying back to their cultures, their histories, their roots, that identity. So when we think of as early childhood educators and we think of social and emotional learning and supporting a child's social and emotional development, when they're multilingual, bilingual, what are we doing to support and to promote healthy bilingual, multilingual identities? And then in the green, we have a quote in Spanish. And here the quote was coming from, and I'm going to say it in Spanish and then I will translate it. But here the question that was asked was around those concerns and the fears for language. And here the mother who shared this quote, she is sharing that fear of language loss. And so she says, no pueden comunicarse con sus primos, ni con sus abuelos, ni con sus tíos, ni con nadie, porque no entienden. So they can't communicate, and the they is the children. They can't communicate with their cousins, nor their grandparents, nor their uncles, nor with nobody because they don't understand. So there she was talking about older children that she has and other children in the family, young adult children, teenagers, middle school age children that had already started to lose their Spanish. And this was a fear for her younger children. So, if families of multilingual children need opportunities to talk about language, and I just gave you some examples of things that they say when you're giving them those opportunities, what should we talk about? A good place to start is by thinking critically about language practices and goals that you as an educator may have in your classroom, in your program. In particular, I also want you to think about language practices and goals that you may already know that your families are engaging in. So, language practices and goals. So, family language practices and goals, this is what I've been discussing and mentioning throughout so far. It's all the little things that families do at home with their language. So, when we come in and we ask them, is another language spoken in your home? We're often expecting a yes or no. And it's very funny. We've learned from parents by talking to them about their perceptions of home language surveys. We've heard parents who have said, well, when they ask us, is another language spoken in the home, that sometimes they just feel like saying, well, it depends. It depends on who's in the home. It depends on what they're doing. It depends on the situation or the conversation or the topic. And we've even had one mom who said, but the form they give us never gives us an option to say, it depends. So we have seen how parents have noticed when their children are playing at home independently. Sometimes the child is switching languages while at play. We've noticed that parents are actually very keen observers of how their children are using language among siblings or with cousins, or how the child uses language a little differently when they're out in the community, for instance, at a playground versus when the child is in direct communication with the parent. So, family language practices and goals, this goes so much more than typical questions that many of us as educators tend to ask. So, what would you like to know about those practices and goals, about those fears and concerns, about the questions that they may have? Then there's school language practices and goals. Now, Illinois is a very unique state because we have pre-K teachers that have ESL or bilingual endorsements or certificates. So Illinois is actually a leader across the country in doing this and having this requirement. So when you think of your school language practices and goals, how are you communicating to the families you serve of your approach to supporting language when the children are in your care? Often, what I've heard from parents in the research that we've done, sometimes well they'll just say things like, "Well, we know that in the classroom there's an assistant who speaks the other language, a language other than English," or and they'll say things like, "Well, we know that the teacher can speak Spanish, or we know that the teacher can speak our language, but we don't know like what they're doing there to support it." Often parents have expressed, well, we know that they're teaching them songs because their children come home and they're singing these songs in English or in the other language, but they really don't understand like what exactly is focused on supporting language. And if you have an ESL program versus a bilingual pre-K program, or the children are transitioning into kinder and you're starting to have them go through the process of getting screened for EL services in kinder, there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of practices and goals that are implicit. So, for instance, an ESL program model has a goal of English acquisition. It does not have a goal of bilingual development. So there are goals, implicit and explicit, to how we model the services that we offer children. So the question then is, how are you communicating that to the families? And how do we create those spaces for the families to ask us questions about it, right? So that was a lot. That was a lot. I'm going to pause here and just give you the opportunity to share using the chat box when and how. Well, actually, I'm going to move the chat box over because I think we shortened the question there. Karen, is there a way to just minimize the chat box for just a minute? There we go. What is one thing you ask families to learn more about children's language use at home? What is one thing you ask families to learn more about children's language use at home? Traditions. We have a survey. Tradition. Favorite book. Child's strength. What language do they watch TV in? Yes. Over and over in our research, we've had parents from Central America that would comment. It seemed to be a thing where their children were watching cartoons in Russian or in different languages on YouTube. Who lives in the home? Because, yes, that goes back to the it depends. It depends which relative is around and what language the child's going to use. Does everyone in the home speak the same language? So I see a lot of questions about what language children are using. What language do they speak? So to push our thinking, has anyone listening today ever asked a parent, what language do you hope your child speaks when they're an adult? Because that gets to those dreams and goals. Tammy, anything you'd like to chime in on? Any patterns you noticed in the chat box?
No, I agree with everything that you recapped, and interesting to get the data from you from directly from those in the field, right? In terms of what's going on out in the program. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yep. So I'm going to go off script a bit because I do have to share. In one of the research projects that we did, I was interviewing a mom, and she was a Spanish speaking mother. I was interviewing her in Spanish, and I said to her, Senora, close your eyes. And she closed her eyes, and I said, I want you to picture your child, her son, as an adult. So she has her eyes closed. She's sitting right in front of me. I see her start to smile. So I said to her, can you picture him? And she nods her head. And I said, does he look like you? Does he look like your husband? You know, who does he look like? So she starts to giggle, but her eyes are still closed. And then I said to her, can you picture your son as an adult? Can you see him? Can you imagine him working? And so she says, yes. She nods her head. And then I said, what language is he speaking? And a tear came out of her eye and she started to cry. She opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, Inglés, English. And she broke down crying because she said that her biggest fear was that her son, she was a monolingual Spanish speaker, and so she only spoke Spanish. And she said, my biggest fear is that in the future I'm not going to be able to talk to my son, that he's going to lose his Spanish. So it is important to get to those questions of their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their concerns, and more importantly, those spaces for those questions so that we can have that dialogue. So, how can we apply the information that's been shared and discussed so far to our practice? So remember, one of our goals today was to initiate critical reflection on practice. Here, I offer you a few questions to consider as you think of ways to engage with families of multilingual children using a language focused family engagement approach. What opportunities are there during registration? How can you create spaces for language focused family engagement throughout the year? What do you already ask families about language, and is it enough? Is it helpful? Are you able to use that information in a meaningful way? What can change? What else could you ask? What do families want to know about current practice in the classroom or program to support their children's language development? So these are just a few questions to consider. It boils down to asking yourself, what do I currently do to engage with families specifically around their child's language learning and development? And I believe, Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you did include in the handout these questions that are on the screen,
I
correct?
did, yeah. They're on the
Excellent.
one that has the links on it. It's at the top of that handout.
Okay. So going on, so where do we go from here? So we're going to start to wrap up. In the next couple of slides, I'll talk about a few resources to help you further explore the topic of language-focused family engagement. So on the WIDA website, you will find publications geared toward educators that talk about language-focused family engagement. The slide shows you some of the publications that are currently available, and the second, third, and fourth one are included in your handout. So let me clarify that. The first handout you see to the left of the slide, it has two little images there. It just says family engagement and then participación familiar. That was a WIDA focus bulletin that was published, I believe, 4 years ago. But it is the only focus bulletin that we actually translated to Spanish. And I have to give kudos to some Illinois parents, Spanish speaking parents, because we did reach out to a BPAC, a Bilingual Parent Advisory Council of a suburban school district, and members of the BPAC actually reviewed the Spanish translation because I asked them, does this make sense if we gave it to parents? But because it is 4 years old, that's why we didn't include it in your handout, but it is still available on the WIDA website. And it actually highlights other parents from an Illinois bilingual parent advisory council and their stories as being members of a BPAC. So you can explore these resources to learn more about the topic that we've covered today. So these are for you as educators, with the exception of the one that's in Spanish, because that one we knew it could be shared, especially if your district has a bilingual parent advisory council, a BPAC. Now, here are two resources that you can access and share directly with families. We recently published these two new resources and they're available on our website. Learning Language Every Day is available in 4 languages: Arabic, English, Spanish, and Simplified Chinese. And the Family Connections Through Home Languages is available in English and Spanish. So these, I think, Family Connections Through Home Languages, I believed was just launched last week. And the Learning Language Every Day we launched, it was about a month ago. It was like shortly after COVID stay home and the school closures was starting. So it was about a month ago. Tammy, is there anything that you would like to chime in on how you've been sharing these resources with other educators?
Well, I have been in all of the webinars. So if you've been on any other webinars with me in the last couple of weeks, you would have gotten the links at least to the one on the left, but possibly both. And they have been very, very well received, not only during the webinar, but I've gotten some messages from folks after the fact that they really liked them and were eager to get them out to their families.
Yep. So I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing folks comment on the story about the mom um, and the woman who opened her eyes and started crying because she said Ingles. I see a comment there about someone who says like today's generation, younger generation of parents may have already lost their languages. So I'm gonna go off script a bit, Tammy, because I'm gonna just share just really quick. One of the other mothers that I had the honor and pleasure of interviewing for a research project is a younger generation mother, US born Latina. And because of external negative messages about Hispanics and speaking Spanish, she had that moment in her youth where she sort of refused to acknowledge, to accept, to speak the language, etc. So she lost it, but regained it in college. So, hearing her story of that personal journey of having rejected that part of her identity because of negative experiences and negative messages externally, but then the regaining it, she has made it, it's like her mission is to ensure that her children are growing up bilingual, biliterate, proud of their identity, aware of their roots and where they come from. And she's been doing an amazing job with her kids. Then I think I'm going to close with, this idea of learning language every day. The activities that are there, we tried to pull together some simple activities that a family can just, it's thinking through and thinking of language. Now, I don't know about all of you that are on today's call, but I know in my family it is very common that children listen to the adults around them. Where I, for instance, was never really raised with the type of interaction of direct adult child and questioning and prompting me, etc. I just listened to all my aunts, uncles, cousins that were around and just caught on. So one of the things that we did notice in a recent research project with the parents in the state of Maryland, moms from Central America were expressing how it was a culture shock for them to hear recommendations from early childhood teachers telling them to talk to their child. So it was actually really funny because one mom said, I went to the grocery store, I had my 3-year-old with me, but the teacher kept telling me to just talk to my child, just talk out loud. Oh, I see I need milk, or oh, look at all the different types of juice. And so she said she went through the grocery store and she was just trying to do that and talk out loud and talk to her child and like ask him questions about, produce and what does he like and what doesn't he like. But the whole time she was doing that, she shared how she felt that if people in her hometown in Guatemala were watching her, that they were going to be like, she's crazy. Look at her. Talk to her 3-year-old. So we had a lot of conversation because several of the mothers felt how that was just a different thing for them. So the language learning every day activities, it does have things that we believe most families would be able to connect to in one way or another and adapt. And it's just that idea of just talking to children or having them recount, retell, etc. So they're available on the website and they were sent out via email. So hopefully you enjoy taking a look at those. So in closing, we ask with the chat box one more time, what is one takeaway you are leaving with this afternoon of the information that I've shared, that Tammy shared about our partnership, what you've been seeing in the chat box? What is one takeaway that you are leaving with this afternoon? Voice. What languages do you want your child to speak? Yes. Be more intentional. Be more intentional with hopes, dreams, etc. Yes. Tammy, anything you're seeing? I'm getting goosebumps looking at this chat box.
I agree. In fact, I was just sitting here wondering, um, kind of the juxtaposition of what we may have walked into this webinar expecting and what folks are walking out with. But this is exactly what we were hoping to see at this point.
Yep. I love the idea of asking parents about what language their child watches TV in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that play when they're home. It was so funny. Monolingual Spanish speaking mom that her family's language policy in the home was Spanish is in the home. And she says, but I notice that when my daughter is playing with her dolls and she's talking to herself because she's playing with the dolls, she speaks in English. She puts the dolls down and she's all in Spanish, but with the dolls she speaks in English. So the mom was sitting there and she's like, I wonder if it's because does she have dolls like that in the early childhood classroom? And maybe that's why. It was an interesting observation. And then we had a situation the other way around. Predominantly English speaking family that was bilingual, but at home they were mostly in English. And what they noticed was when their two daughters were interacting and playing together, the daughters would speak Spanish. But with everything else, the daughters were mostly in English. So those little observations of what language are they using when they play? That's a good one. Excellent. All right. And don't forget, friendly reminder, we are capturing those chat box comments. And so we'll be sure everyone here will get that. So, in closing, just an opportunity for any final questions. I'm still keeping an eye on the little chat box that's on the side here. Any final questions, comments?
And while those are coming in, if I could just give a plug to the WIDA modules, if you don't mind. All right, so
Yes.
I just wanted to remind everyone, in case you weren't familiar with them or if the first time you heard about them was in today's webinar, the second handout that you received, the one that we're calling the memberships flyer, the benefits flyer, there's information on that flyer about how to access 5 free 1-hour modules that you can receive ISB credit or Gateways credit, or both if you want both. And they're self-paced, and please avail yourself of those. I know there are a lot of folks across the state who have requirements with regards to PD that they need to fulfill during the stay-at-home order. So please take a look at those modules and feel free to complete as many of them as you would like. And then at the end, just be sure to fill out the evaluation form that will pop up. There'll be a link at the bottom of the module. Fill out that evaluation form, and it'll take you automatically to the documentation you need for Gateways and ISB credit. We would love to get your feedback on those as well. Do they cost to get credit? No, they're free. The modules are free. The credit's free. It's all free. Everything's free.
Yes. Yes. And so where can you find the modules? You're going to get the link. The link is included in the membership flyer that Tammy and her team provided as the handouts for today. And it's also available on the ECPL website.
It
right,
is,
Tammy?
though that can be a bit tricky if you're not familiar with our website to find it, but definitely you can get to it that way. The fastest way is to go back to the handouts for today. You got that email on Tuesday. It's that friendly reminder email you received on Tuesday of this week for this webinar. Click on the big word in all caps that says handouts. Then go to the benefits flyer and you'll see the information right there with a link that'll take you right to the site. Create yourself an account and then you'll be off and running.
Excellent. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Tammy, thank you so much, Tammy, for the invitation to do this. This was fun. I love presenting to Illinois audiences, my home